Welcome to Walking the Haftarah. I'm Tyler Merwin, and this is Torah portion, Behar. This week's Torah portion is Leviticus 25:1 through 26:2. Our Haftarah this week is Jeremiah 32, verses 6 through 27. Behar means on the mount, as in our opening line of our portion it reads, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land that I give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Leviticus 25:1 and 2. This week's Torah portion will be part one of a double portion when read in non-leap years, read with Behuchatai. Our portion this week focuses on the Shemitah, which is known as the sabbatical year, the Yovel, which is the Jubilee, and the associated rules of redemption for both people and the land. In our Haftarah, we'll see an example of the redemption of the land, or property, that actually brings us hope. So let's begin by reviewing our portion this week, beginning in Leviticus 25. We've been told many times up until now in the Torah how important the Shabbat is to Adonai's people. But here it says that the promised land itself is to have a Shabbat or a Sabbath to the Holy One. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather in its fruits. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. Leviticus 25:3 and 4. 6 years the earth of the promised land is worked, but the 7th year is the land's Sabbath, the Shemitah. Shemitah literally means release in Hebrew. No working the ground or pruning the vines or the trees. There will also be no harvesting, which would be the commercial aspect of gathering, which focuses on selling and or trading. The text goes on to say that the produce of this Sabbath will provide for you and for your household, which is you and your servants. And it also says that it shall yield food for you. So he's re-emphasizing that this is going to sustain you. This is an entire year of faith and trust in Adonai that the land will provide everything that you need without our intervention and without our help. It also says that the food it produces during this time is also for your cattle and the wild animals. So not only can you not care for the soil and the plants to ensure that they produce all they can, you also can't protect the crops from wild animals because Adonai created it for them too. As I mentioned in the last series, this is very akin to the manna in the wilderness. The Israelites had to learn to trust and have faith that the Almighty would provide all the food they needed each day in the desert. As a farmer, this can really test your faith. But if your mind is at ease in faith, you really have time to fully enjoy and appreciate the land that Adonai created for us. You shall count 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the time of the 7 weeks of years shall give you 49 years. Then you shall sound the loud trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement you shall sound the trumpet throughout all your land. Leviticus 25:8 and 9. Not only are we to observe the Shemitah every 7th year, we are also to observe the Yovel, or Jubilee, after 7 complete Shemitah cycles. We are to proclaim liberty in this 50th year, which is done with a shofar blast on Yom Kippur. This year carries on the rules of the Shemitah, but also releases every Hebrew slave. This would mean, remember back when we looked at the slaves, that if a slave wanted to stay with his owner, he could go to the doorpost and have the awl into his earlobe, and he didn't have to be released. But this is not the case in the Yovel, because if he is a Hebrew, then he has a clan and a family, and everything gets reset. So at that time, he would have to go back to his original inheritance. and the land goes back to its original families and clans, back to who had original ownership. This is a stark reminder that we really don't own anything. It all belongs to the Holy One, who created all things. The Shemitah cycles should build our faith and trust in our provider, cycle after cycle. The Yovel takes an extra measure of faith, as the land will lay fallow for an additional year. The text goes on to state that when making land deals, you must keep in mind that when the Yovel comes, everything goes back, everything gets reset, and that should be calculated into the negotiated price. And if you say, "What shall we eat in the 7th year, if we may not sow or gather in our crop? I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, so that it will produce a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will be eating some of the old crop. You shall eat the old until the 9th year, when the crop arrives." Leviticus 25:20-22. Adonai promises his blessing to provide for his people who place their faith in him. "The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me, and in all the country you possess, you shall allow a redemption of the land." Leviticus 25:23-24. Since the land belongs to Adonai, and he, through Joshua, assigned the lands to the tribes of Israel, there will always be an opportunity to redeem it back to its original family or clan. The land will only be sold to another because of a financial hardship, but he or a family member will always have the right to buy it back for a fair value, or it will automatically go back in the Yovel year. The person who bought the land was to sell it back to the original owner if they can pay the fair value of the property. This is non-negotiable. If the same thing happens to a person who sells a home in a walled city, they have the right to redeem the house for exactly 1 year. And if it's not redeemed in that year, then it permanently becomes the new owner's home and does not return in the Yovel. The Holy Land is treated differently than the actual physical structures that we live in. This is like comparing a home with property to an apartment. The homes of the Levites are a little bit different, no matter where they are. Because the Levites have no inheritance, no matter where they're located, they can be redeemed at any time, and they will always be returned in the Yovel. If your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself with you, you shall support him as though he were a stranger and a sojourner, and he shall live with you. Take no interest from him or profit, but fear your God, that your brother may live beside you. You shall not lend him your money at interest, nor give him your food for profit. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan, and to be your God. Leviticus 25:35-38. The sage Maimonides, which is the Rambam, referring to this section, stated, "The highest form of charity is to prevent a person from becoming poor by offering a loan or employment, investing in his business, or any other form of assistance that would avoid poverty." If your brother does become impoverished and cannot support himself or his family, then they can become bondservants according to the regulations in the Torah. But they must be released in the Yovel. But a Gentile servant that is purchased will stay with the family forever. This is because the Gentile that is purchased is considered to be part of the family, kind of an adoption process in a way. Since they have no inheritance in the Yovel or inheritance of the land, if they were released with what? Released back to their pagan lands? So, in a way, they are actually grafted in through this process, and they are under the same regulations as the rest of the family. This is actually a way of growing Israel. If a stranger or sojourner with you becomes rich, and your brother beside him becomes poor and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner with you, or to a member of the stranger's clan, then after he is sold, he may be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle or his cousin may redeem him, or a close relative from his clan may redeem him. Or if he grows rich, he may redeem himself. Leviticus 25:47-49. It is our duty to redeem our brother if possible, even though we may feel that they deserve to be where they are due to their poor choices. This shows the mercy and the grace of our great Creator. The owner of the servant must be paid a fair price according to the calculation regarding the Yovel. He cannot be redeemed. If he cannot be redeemed, he and his family will be released in the Yovel year. For it is to me that the people of Israel are servants. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God. Leviticus 25:55. If you are in Yeshua, you are not your own. You were bought with a price. Our portion ends with the prohibition against making and worshiping idols. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Leviticus 26:2. This brings us to our Haftarah this week, in Jeremiah 32:6-27. To set the scene, Jerusalem is under siege by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and Zedekiah is the king of Judah. Jeremiah had prophesied to Zedekiah that Adonai had given Jerusalem over to Nebuchadnezzar, and that Zedekiah himself would be taken off to Babylon. Zedekiah, not quite liking this, has Jeremiah imprisoned in the courtyard of confinement, which is in the palace of the king. Jeremiah has been publicly proclaiming doom and gloom, but Adonai is about to use him to provide hope in this present darkness. Jeremiah said, "The word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh came to me. Behold, Hanamel, the son of Shallum, your uncle, will come to you and say, Buy my field that is at Anathoth, for the right of redemption by purchase is yours." Jeremiah 32:6-7. Adonai spoke to Jeremiah, and he publicly proclaimed this, that he would be having visitors with this specific request. At a minimum, the guards in the courtyard of confinement would have heard Jeremiah's declaration, but likely many others were around at the same time and also heard his words. Now, if Hanamel comes and does exactly what Jeremiah said he would, then that proves Jeremiah's words to be true, a true word from Adonai. Then Hanamel, my cousin, came to me in the court of the guard, in accordance with the word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and said to me, Buy my field that is at Anathoth, in the land of Benjamin, for the right of possession and redemption is yours. Buy it for yourself. Then I knew that this was the word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Verse 8. This is the tie-in to our portion, redeeming family property. Jeremiah knew from Adonai that Hanamel would come with this offer, but he didn't, until the actual event took place, understand whether he was supposed to actually buy it or not. But when he actually had the proposal in front of him, that's when he realized that this is exactly what he was to do. And that's why he states at the end, Then I knew it was from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. This looks like folly in the physical world. The land is occupied by the enemy and looks like it will be occupied by the enemy forever. So why would you purchase land that you could never possess? And I bought the field at Anathoth from Hanamel, my cousin, and weighed out the money to him, 17 shekels of silver. I signed the deed, sealed it, got witnesses, and weighed the money on scales. Then I took the sealed deed of purchase, containing the terms and conditions, and the open copy. I gave the deed of purchase to Baruch, the son of Neriah, the son of Maaseiah, in the presence of Hanamel, my cousin, in the presence of the witnesses who signed the deed of purchase. and in the presence of all the Judeans who were sitting in the court of the guard. I charged Baruch in their presence, saying, Thus said Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, the God of Israel, Take these deeds, both this sealed deed of purchase and this open deed, and put them in an earthenware vessel, that they may last for a long time. For thus says Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, the God of Israel, Houses and fields and vineyards shall again be bought in this land. Verses 9 through 15. Adonai wanted this transaction to be a tangible and public transaction. Exile was coming, but there would be a redemption and a return back to the land. After I had given the deed of purchase to Baruch, the son of Neriah, I prayed to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, saying, Ah, Lord Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, it is you who have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and by your outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. You show steadfast love to thousands, but you repay the guilt of fathers to their children after them. O great and mighty God, whose name is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, great in counsel and mighty in deed, whose eyes are open to all the ways of the children of man, rewarding each one according to his ways and according to the fruit of his deeds. You have shown signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, and to this day in Israel and among all mankind, and have made a name for yourself as it is to this day. You brought your people Israel out of the land of Egypt with signs and wonders, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, and with great terror. And you gave them this land, which you swore to their fathers to give them, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they entered and took possession of it, but they did not obey your voice or walk in your law. They did nothing of all that you commanded them to do. Therefore you have made all this disaster come upon them. Behold, the siege mounds have come up to the city to take it, and because of sword and famine and pestilence, the city is given into the hands of the Chaldeans, who are fighting against it. What you have spoken has come to pass, and behold, you see it. Yet you, O Lord, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, have said to me, Buy the field for money and get witnesses, though the city is given into the hands of the Chaldeans. Verses 16 through 25. Jeremiah honors Adonai, recalling his great acts and how Israel has failed on their end. He admits the judgment that is now upon them is deserved and just. But Jeremiah is also having trouble seeing the hope in their current situation, or why he had them do that act. The word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh came to Jeremiah. Behold, I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of all flesh. Is anything too hard for me? Verses 26 and 27. Adonai continues to explain that the judgment will happen, but that there will be a redemption and a restoration. The times we are living in seem to be getting dark, like the enemy is laying siege all around us. Many of us are dealing with personal struggles that have us feeling defeated. Just remember that we know how the story ends. When things seem impossible, just remember Adonai's word to Jeremiah. Behold, I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of all flesh. Is anything too hard for me? I pray this teaching has been edifying. Let's lift up the name of the Holy One with love and echad. Shalom.